Welcome to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast, bringing you the latest updates from the world of sports, gambling, and pop culture. Because you can't have a show without hot takes or a Tiger King meme these days. Know what I'm saying? Now, with over 200 episodes and ready to get after it again, here's your host, Dwayne Callender.
Good morning and welcome to the show, everybody. Got a lot to talk about with NFL Week 9, so let's get right down to it. I'm going to go through my against the spread picks. We're going to talk a little DFS, and if there are any time left to get this episode uploaded, I'll probably try to go through one or two fantasy, regular fantasy start or sit questions. So getting right down to it. The first game in the early slate we're going to talk about is Baltimore traveling to Indy. This line shifted quite a bit because this one was Ravens minus 3.5. It's been bet all the way to Baltimore, even being a pick'em or a 1 point underdog. Ravens got a lot of question marks. I think the public is still looking at this Ravens team as one where they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. There are some question marks, but the thing of the matter is the Colts are coming off a bye week. It's this one is not that easy. To be honest, the Colts are 5-2 coming off the bye. I gotta take the Colts here. If I'm in a picks pool and I've got the Colts as a 3-point underdog, I mean, that's hard to pass up. But realistically, now the way this line eventually got bet down, you can you would say you'd still pick the Ravens to win straight up, but the Colts, if you give me a field goal, I'm gonna take it. So. Colts will be the spread pick. The way this line has shifted, I still would take the Ravens to win on the money line, but honestly, this is not a line I really want to touch all that much. So this would be a pass straight up betting wise. But if you're in a picks pool and got the early lock on the lines, yeah, I would take Indy as the underdog. Next up, Kansas City. Against Carolina. Again, another game where the line shifted all over the place. KC opened up as a 10-point favorite, and then it started getting all swirly in terms of how the line looked, and I can't figure out why. Just because Kansas City didn't cover against the Jets didn't mean it was... Kansas City did cover against the Jets. What am I talking about? They did cover against the Jets. I guess they expected Kansas City to blow out the Jets even further. I'm not quite following the betting pattern here. Carolina got beat by Atlanta on Thursday Night Football, so they got the extra couple of days of rest. But realistically, this is a spot for KC to take control. Now, you can make the case that maybe Kansas City just looks past Carolina, but outside of that, there's nothing here in this Carolina squad that tells me anything that they're not going to lose by 2 touchdowns here to the Chiefs. So to me, I'm betting this one, and I'm taking the Chiefs. Minus 10. I mean, to me, I think Kansas City wins by 2 touchdowns. I don't think this one's all that close. So them winning by 2 scores, at worst, it gets me even. But yeah, I'm taking the Chiefs here. Moving on to Tennessee against Chicago. All right, so here's the deal. Tennessee has dropped 2 games. Chicago's dropped 2 games. Who do I think is actually the better team? I do have my questions about Tennessee, but we know what Nick Foles is. We know Nick Foles isn't that good. We know Mitch Trubisky isn't that good. We know the Bears' passing game is suspect. We know David Montgomery will fall down at the slightest sign of contact and is only going to get you 3 yards of carry, no matter if he gets tackled or not. So I don't know what I'm supposed to expect with this Bears team other than mediocre offense. The Bears defense is going to have to win this game for them. And, I'd rather not take roll the dice that the Bears defense can get a defensive touchdown to win this game. I'm just saying, Bears plus 5.5. I guess I take the Bears. I don't like it because Tennessee's defense has been suspect. Could the Bears get a backdoor cover at the very end? Yeah, but Tennessee's defense hasn't been consistent enough to make me feel confident about taking them as a touchdown. Basically, you would need a touchdown to cover here. I don't feel great about those odds. So I will begrudgingly take the Bears in the pick'em pool. But as for straight up bets, not even going to touch this one. This one's just a move along type of game. Next up, Denver traveling to Atlanta. This one's simple. Folks are treating the Falcons like world beaters, since they beat Carolina on Thursday Night Football. Atlanta got their big time primetime game win against the Carolina teams. That's not very good. Atlanta still sucks. There's no getting around it. You got question marks about Calvin Ridley being healthy. They say he's doubtful to play. If Ridley is doubtful to play from a regular fantasy standpoint, I would say and you need a roster filler. I would say pick up Russell Gage or Christian Blake for your wide receiver spot, just because they're going to get volume. Hayden Hurst maybe might get an uptick, but this is going to be a Julio Jones game. If Julio Jones balls, then Atlanta could win this game. If Julio Jones just kind of goes into the ether and, has a meh game where he only gets you about 60 yards on 4 catches, Atlanta's dropping this game. I would bet on Denver because I'm not remotely convinced that Atlanta's any good. Some of the public money's coming in on Atlanta. I would take the Denver side of the fence. I like Noah Fant, the tight end for Denver, quite a bit. I like Jerry Jeudy quite a bit. So Fant and Jeudy would be some DFS plays. I really like them on FanDuel over DraftKings. I just kind of look at this game as this is a spot for Denver to do quite well in on the road. Even though it's a 1 o'clock start, I still like Denver to take care of business against Atlanta. Next up, divisional matchup between Detroit and traveling to Minnesota. Both these teams are not good. Let's just get that out of the way. But with that being said, this line came down a little bit. I expect this game to be close. And because it's going to be close, as long as this line is above 3 and, as a dog, I got to take Detroit. If you get a 4 or 4.5 line, depending on your picks pool, I would take Detroit. Would I bet them outright? No. This is not one of those games that I would feel great about betting. But, I would take Detroit with a 4.5 line. This one looks to be like it'll come down to a field goal kind of game. So I would take Detroit in that spot. Next up, Houston and Jacksonville, 2 teams that both suck. Again, there's just nothing here that is remotely appetizing. From the perspective of the Jags, they're trying to tank for Trevor Lawrence. Houston, on the other hand, they probably don't have a shot at the division, but they're still going after it anyway. So I just look at it from the standpoint of Houston should take care of business. I don't trust Houston as any kind of large favorite, and they would have to win by a touchdown, but it's a lot to ask for the Jags to not let the rope go, if you will, come the fourth quarter. So I think unless the Jags have a lead, I think Houston puts up a couple of points to get clear of the line. So I would take Houston. I'm not outright looking to bet it, but for a picks pool, I would take Houston. Next up, we got this terrible matchup between the Giants and the Washington football team. Washington tanked the last go around and gave the Giants a victory that they had no business winning. But the Giants have not won. And the only thing I can say about this game is I hope to watch as little of it as humanly possible. So that's all my commentary is going to be. If you want to play guys like McLaurin and Slayton, knock yourselves out. Just be prepared that they can easily bust, because between Jones and Kyle Allen, they both could easily bust, and this game goes absolutely nowhere today and ends up being low scoring. So I do not see much appeal about this game at all. So I'm going to turn the chapter. For Picks Pool reasons, I take Washington 3.5 points. I'd avoid this game like the plague from a betting standpoint. Next up is the feature game of the 1 o'clock slate. Seattle traveling to Buffalo. Buffalo, a 3-point underdog. Here's the thing. I just have issues with this Bills team. I don't think they're as good as advertised, but the circumstances behind this one, Seattle's got the bulk of their schedule coming up over the next month. They're traveling out to Buffalo, New York. They are going to be miserable. It's actually a decent spring day, shockingly. So it's not going to be the cold, frigid temperatures that you would have expected to be in play for November weather in Buffalo. I actually think Seattle's going to be putting up very good points here. And this is going to be the most popular game from a DFS perspective, because you got Josh Allen, you got Russell Westbrook, you got Stephon Diggs versus Lockett and Metcalf. There's a lot of plays from a wide receiver standpoint that they can go to. Seattle obviously doing a run back by committee approach, but I think with Ted Lasso, I gotta be perfectly honest. I really do not have I don't have a good feeling about this one. This is like one of those Ted Lasso, I gotta go with my gut kind of things. For those of you watching the comedy. But it's one of those things where I don't have a great feel for Seattle today. I know all the public's going to be on Seattle. This kind of feels like one of those, I'm going to take a flyer on Buffalo on the money line to win outright. It just feels a little bit off. I can't put my finger on what exactly I think Seattle has going against them today. It just feels like one of those games where Seattle, we see this from time to time, where they just go in and they just have a bad day at the office. And I'm struggling with that one, because realistically, that's not like a gut feel isn't a great way to do your picks. But the way Buffalo matches up against Seattle, I think Seattle's going to have a tougher time running the football, which is what Seattle wants to do on offense, especially with some of the recent games and kind of losing control of the pace. They want to calm things down as much as possible. And Buffalo is going to be playing all over the place, trying to force fumbles. I think that there's a very real possibility that this ends up being the shootout game and determines the slate. So, yeah, you can fade the game, but I would not do that as a recommendation. I think you got to play some drivers from this race. It's just a matter of which drivers end up being the most valuable. But I think at some point, sooner or later, there's going to be some conflict tied to this game that will determine who's going to win the slate. I just feel in my bones that game's probably going to be the one that determines the slate, depending on who you picked and just how you faded certain players. I think that's going to have to be how the optimal build goes. All right, moving on to the 4 o'clock window. We got the Los Angeles, Las Vegas, whatever. It's the Oakland Raiders. Oakland Raiders via Las Vegas, traveling to play the Chargers. Shortest road trip of the year for the Raiders. Non-existent fan base for the Chargers just because of how ticked off they are with how the Chargers handled everything. I gotta say that this feels as though it's a Gruden spot. I will fade the Raiders in other matchups later on this year, but I think today this one actually kind of benefits the Raiders. And kind of going from there. So I would go with the story being told by the wrestlers. But being determined by the competitors. I just don't necessarily see the play here. So I would lean more towards the side of caution with actually betting this one outright. But for a picks pool, I take Vegas. Next up, Arizona hosting Miami. Miami's better than people think. Arizona 4.5 point favorites. But the question mark is Tua's still starting, and Tua didn't show anything last week. Tua in a road start, there's no way I can pick a rookie QB that looked as shaky as Tua did last week. Yeah, maybe he got some of the cobwebs and nervousness out of his system, but there's still too much going on to be able to trust him to handle a high-profile meeting like that so early in his not even term yet, because he hasn't even been sworn in as the full-time starter for years to come. It was more of a plug-and-play situation with Tua because they're trying to evaluate whether or not they're going to commit to this guy long-term, which I talked about in a previous episode. So I do have some concerns about any plays from this game outside of Chase Edmonds. I think you can run on Miami. I think Edmonds can catch the pass out of the backfield as well. That would make a decent enough difference. So that's where I kind of look at it from a DFS perspective. I'd be looking at Chase Edmonds, but not much else going on in this game, and I kind of avoid it outright from a betting perspective. Up next, the Steelers traveling to Dallas. Cowboys are an absolute mess and a joke. They won't actually bring in a reliable veteran QB. Dalton still isn't ready to go, so we got Garrett Gilbert. Man, it might as well put his face on the back of a milk carton because no one would be able to pick him out of the back of a lineup. This is done. Point blank, this game's already over. You're taking Pittsburgh. I'm sorry. I'm just wasting my breath talking about the Cowboys with respect to that game. All right. New Orleans in the Sunday night game, going to play Tampa. Tampa 4.5 point favorites, and I'm taking Tampa. New Orleans won that first game. It was the first game of the year. They got a pick 6 against Brady. Tampa shot themselves in the foot a couple of times on offense. I think the script gets flipped this time. New Orleans has looked far less impressive. We're still not entirely sure what the Michael Thomas situation is, but I would take my chances with Tampa in that one. I just don't see a whole lot going on that would make a sizable difference on a number of these shootings. But I would certainly take that under advisement. But it's not exactly one where you can be cavalier about the invite. So, I think with everything going on, if New Orleans, if Tampa drops this game to New Orleans and they get swept in the season series, the division's over. This is the last stand for Tampa and I think they show up and execute today. I feel very confident about Tampa in both picks pools and betting it outright that they're going to win. I just don't see the pathway for New Orleans to get the job done, especially when it's obvious that Michael Thomas isn't playing today. I don't like it at all. And then finally, we got the Pats traveling to New York to play the Jets. New England has been underwhelming, to say the least. But the Jets are actively tanking again. And, with these teams that are just bad, just flat out bad, and you can see how they're tanking, it just doesn't make any sense. So I don't see any value here with even trying to mess around with the Jets. I think the play is New England or go home and call it a week. And, that's the way I kind of feel about it. I would just take New England and move on. There's just nothing of value here in this game from fantasy perspective, DFS perspective. There's just nothing there. So that's where I kind of come down on the subject. I just don't see a whole lot going on in this Monday night game. I mean, I'll do some showdown lineups, but there's not much to it that I would have any interest in going for it. So, in terms of some last minute advice. Okay, so we got a question here: LeGarrette Blount or playing David Montgomery? Blount has to deal with the timeshare with Ronald Jones, but as I said before, David Montgomery will only get you 3 yards. What your floor is with David Montgomery. It's just not going to be any good. So I have an issue with trying to play David Montgomery when he's not going to put up major numbers, and you have to get that station to 30,000 to even hang that messaging down without squandering so much fabric. I mean the groundwork being laid down on some of these areas. I don't see much outside of a showdown. In terms of Montgomery and Blount, head to head, Blount is going to. Oh my God, I'm saying Blount. I mean Leonard Fournette is going to be that blunt instrument like LeGarrette Blount was, and just closing out games and just running over teams. I just don't see where you're going to get David Montgomery to be this elite running back where he's getting 15 to 20 points per week. I think he's an 11 to 12 guy, and that's pretty much what you can expect from him week in, week out. I just don't see it. So that's where I kind of land on the pick standpoint. Now, let's get into some of the builds. So over on FanDuel, I think this is the build, and I'm pretty much going to be sticking with it throughout. It just kind of comes out, and I mentioned this before because I like Jerry Jeudy, and I like Noah Fant. So the build's going to be Russell Wilson, David Johnson, Dalvin Cook, Jerry Jeudy, John Brown, who's a bit too cheap for the Bills, but he's been out. Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant at tight end, and Chase Edmonds at running back with the Texans defense. I think on FanDuel, this build kind of covers all the bases. You got your stack with Russell Wilson. You run it back with John Brown. I like Dalvin Cook and Edmonds. David Johnson should get good volume against the Jags and kind of run down the clock. So also you play Texas defense, hoping the Jags turn the ball over. But I just think it's a very balanced build for FanDuel purposes moving forward. Now, over on the DraftKings side of the aisle, I'm actually going to take the other side of the game and play Josh Allen, because I think with the pricing for DraftKings, it's a little bit on the wonkier side that, you're paying $7,000 for a QB, but with Josh Allen's upside, he could be closer to 8. And I just think that, he's going to get you the floor because he's going to make first downs running and throwing, scrambling. And there's not going to be much of an answer from Seattle. They struggle mightily against scrambling QBs. It's going to be whether or not Allen has the structure to know how he's being successful and if he needs to do anything to change it. But you at least got to have the foundation first. And it's pretty obvious that the team does not have any sense of rhythm going on. But I will take these comments in better support of the group. But, I just look at it from a DraftKings perspective. When you have Josh Allen in there, you can play Cook, you can play Jacobs, and Lockett. And then you start going down with the cheaper option. So you got Marvin Jones and Marcus Johnson at $3,000 for the Colts. When you have such a low salary, you can start fitting in players. So you can fit in an Evan Ingram. You can fit in Chase Edmonds. Like, the key is having enough balance in the stars and scrubs build where you've got good value that will be on the chalkier side. But it's at least justifiable. It's when you have bad chalk, that's when you get yourself into trouble because you get burned up with a lineup that realistically shouldn't have really worked. So I kind of look at it from that perspective for DFS purposes. I liked I liked the Seattle Buffalo game, and the reason why it's Tyler Lockett over DK Metcalf is that the Bills defense usually funnels players through the middle. Sometimes it's the teams that will give up the outside, but don't want you to go up the middle. The Bills kind of force you to go up the middle, and without having a plan together to stop what we're seeing over the top in the slot, I think that this screams to be a Lockett game above all else for Seattle. So that's the reason why I have a big share of Seattle. On the Buffalo side, I'd rather run Josh Allen naked because he spreads the ball around enough that I don't necessarily see the value in paying up for some of these players when I know the target share is going to be split as evenly as possible. So it makes it very hard as a receiver to know when to expect the ball. But we'll see. As we go along, I'm sure there will be different requests. So that's going to be all for the show today. I'll get this up loaded just so you guys can listen in and make some last-minute tweaks to your lineups or decide on where you want to go on the prop side of the house or just general election items. But that's all for now. Have a good one, and good luck out there today. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all other major outlets.